Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar session 3. Could you please confirm that you can hear me clearly? Please confirm that you can hear me clearly so I can proceed. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nunung, for confirming that you all can hear me nice and clear. So let's begin. Welcome, everyone. And it's a pleasure to see you all again on the third session. Today is going to be a very detailed and a thorough session. I'm going to cover a lot of things today, and we only have 3 hours. So I'm going to make sure that we cover all these important things and at the same time give you enough time to do some activities and hands-on during the session. All right, so this is the third session. So all those who are watching live, welcome. And those who are probably watching this at a later stage, thank you also very much for watching this video. So today I'm going to cover a lot on one research methodology for systematic literature review, which is called as the PRISMA methodology. So PRISMA is very important, especially for medical researchers, because that's where this methodology originated. But then many other disciplines and research areas have started to adopt some variations of PRISMA. So I will try to cover that in the today's session. I need to show this disclaimer like I do every time, so I'll not read it again. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. There are going to be 3 sessions, 1-hour sessions. In the first session, I will talk about PRISMA methodology and its variations, case studies with some. I think I will cover 5 or 6 case studies depending upon how long we go, how long it takes to cover. But I have prepared 6 case studies, but I'll try to stick within 1 hour, how much ever we can cover. And based on some of the feedback that I received, some of you wanted me to cover the introduction section. I will try to do that today as well. So that is the outline for today's session. Once again, I would like to thank you all for the feedback that you have provided. It has been very encouraging, and I feel very happy by looking at the feedback that you all have given. So I have done a screenshot of some of the feedbacks that I have received for each of the different questions. And looking at it, I think the sessions that I'm conducting are useful, and you have been learning through these sessions. So that is good to know. What was the best part of the session 2? So many of you gave some good feedback here. Such as searching and collecting articles and summarizing in Excel. That was amazing. The hands-on session, you liked it. So that's great. Do you have any feedback on the session? So you said satisfactory, very fruitful, excellent way of discussing through case studies. So since you liked case studies, I have incorporated case studies even in today's session. Was there anything that was not clear in the session? So there were a couple of things that came up here. One was Q1 and Q2 article and writing about introduction part. So I will cover that. For Q1 and Q2, I think I may not have time today, but what I would do is I will make a pre-recorded video and I'll put it on YouTube. So you can check on that. And also there was one comment here which said searching for articles who do not have access, for researchers who do not have access to Scopus and Web of Science, what could be done? So I would say that Google Scholar is the alternative. Oh, sorry, I realized I didn't share this screen. So I'll just quickly go through. So this is the disclaimer. this is the agenda. And I was just now talking about the feedback. So I really appreciate you giving very detailed feedback. Thank you for that. Any feedback on today's session? Okay, this I covered. If there was not anything clear, yeah. So you guys mentioned about if we do not have access to Scopus and Web of Science, what is it that you can do? So I think I mentioned previously that you can use Google Scholar. Whatever is there in these two indexes will also be there in Google. Only thing that you would need would be to sort those papers based upon the quality. And for that, this Q1 and Q2 articles are a good benchmark. So I will cover the Q1, Q2 plus this feedback into a video. And the last question I asked was there anything else you wanted to say? So the interesting part that caught my attention was interesting session to start your Sunday. So thank you very much, whoever gave this feedback. Really interesting. Looking forward to the next session. I'm always waiting for attending the session. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on this. Let's move on. So for those who want to, okay, now I'm going to start the first part, which is on PRISMA methodology. And this is the paper here, reference to the paper from where the content I have used. It is an open access paper, so anyone can access it and download it. Just search the title, Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analyses. So that is the what PRISMA stands for. Okay. So within PRISMA, there is a checklist. So if you see the title of the paper, reporting items, you can call it preferred reporting items. So whenever you're writing a systematic literature review, reviewers are looking for these items. You know, sometimes you cover all of them, sometimes you do not. But what PRISMA gives us is the option, is the detailed breakdown of all these different activities. There are total 27 activities in this in PRISMA. And if you see here, there is a column which is called as reported on page number. So when you're writing a systematic review, one good thing that you should do with your reviews is that when you submit your paper for review to the or you're writing a letter to the editor, it is a good idea to have a PRISMA checklist included. So you can say, I have covered all these points which are required in SLR on these pages. Okay, so the idea for us is to ensure that all of these things are covered. So the title, abstract, and title and abstract we have already done in the previous sessions. We will start with this. So primary focus today is on this part, which is methods, which is how we are going to search for keywords. How do we identify keywords? What databases we search? How many results we got? So all that information we will learn how to do it. So there are a few other steps here as well from 13 to 16. Those are very advanced topics, so I'm not going to cover them in the webinar. But you can read through this the paper. You will get the required information from there. So this is a complete list for those who want to see. If the previous screenshot was not very clear, I have broken this down into 2 pages. So reported on page is very important. You need to write on which page all these different items are reported. So like I said, there are 16 items in the method section. We will be only doing 12. Then the next section is on results, which we will do next week. And this will be the final, last week. So that's how the structure of the rest of the webinars is also going to be. I will come back to this. Basically, when you are submitting an SLR, this is a document. This is a flowchart that should be there in your methodology section. This shows the flow that you have taken while conducting your systematic review. Okay, so we will do this in our paper. All right, so let's begin with rationale. Describe the rationale for the review in the context of what is already known. Last week we studied about finding out existing systematic literature review papers and summarizing them. The idea behind that was to identify the rationale. Why are we going to do this systematic literature review? Okay, so we will define the importance of the review question, briefly mention the current state of the knowledge, which is what we did in the last week. Clearly what the review aims to add. So this is where the thing becomes important for us. If we want to know, we want to show what is our research question, we will do that here. Discuss the limitations of existing reviews that may be overcome by this review. So we already completed this task in the last session, where we identified what are the existing reviews, what they have done, and what is it lacking. Objectives. These are research objectives for your literature review paper or for your SLR. They provide an explicit statement of question being addressed. And today I will show you in the examples, I have highlighted research questions that different papers from the 6 papers that we are going to study, how they have identified and explicitly mentioned these questions. I'm not looking at the, I see there are a lot of comments in the YouTube, but I cannot see them right now. I will answer those during the break. Okay. So when you're writing your objectives or research objective, make sure that they are precise and explicit, because that helps the reviewer and also the reader to understand the scope of your SLR, and how it is going to help them in their objectives, or is it going to help them in the problem that they are trying to they are looking a solution for. So maybe your SLR, if it is clearly specified what the objective is and what you're going to achieve, it will help that way. Systematic review can be narrow focused or can be broadly focused, depending upon what is the objective. And in today's session, in the case studies, I have taken examples from both types, so you can see. Broad questions are good because it increases the applicability of the results and facilitate detection of bias. Quite a few of you have either asked me about detection, how to manage bias or detect bias while doing reviews. Either I think there was a discussion on the WhatsApp group or Telegram group, or also on the community website. So we will do that today. It will be, and it is very important that you clearly mention how you are going to address bias in your research. So if you're going to talk about, let's talk about research questions. So here I mentioned that try to keep it precise and explicit. So let's look at an example of what is very vague question versus what is a very explicit and a precise question. So if I were to frame a question for my literature review is such as like this: what do we know about something? That is a very, very, very broad question. And if you try to answer this question using a systematic review, the number of research articles that you would get would be just too many. So it will be very difficult to address that or do that review. Whereas if you try to make it a little bit more specific, such as this: what can cause an increase or decrease in the possibility of XYZ? So this makes you are kind of narrowing the scope, or firstly you're narrowing the scope, but you're also making it more precise and explicit. Such a question is not easy to answer, but possible to answer. You can in a reasonable amount of time gather the relevant literature and answer such a question. So keep in mind that don't have very, very broad question like this. Let's look at some sample research questions. So this I picked up from this paper. It is an open access paper as well. I forgot to put the title of the paper here. But all these links are sorry. If you later on check the YouTube video description, all these links will be provided there. And some of them are already there. So what is the objective here, or research question? We aim to identify the level of adherence towards e-health tools among vulnerable groups. So here you can see the question is precise and explicit. I did not say, or these authors did not say, we aim to identify e-health tools. We aim to identify the level of e-health tools available in the market. So that would have been a very broad question. So what did they do here? They said to firstly the level of adherence towards e-health and to a specific group. So they kind of narrowed the question. Second, we aim to establish how different design and implementation characteristics influence the level of adherence. So they have taken this bit and drilled down a bit more further. Okay, so this is one example. And for a literature review, you can have, or for an SLR, you can have multiple research questions. So this is an example where there are 2 research questions. Another example, and you can see the paper, the references to these paper are given here. The aim of the paper is exploring and understanding how design can contribute towards a CE transition through the adoption of DFX approaches. So if you read the paper, you will know what these abbreviations mean, but this is an example of a good research question. This paper aims to examine the current advances on thermoplastic recycling processes via additive manufacturing technologies. Another example of a research question. Then third one is this paper aims to develop a systematic review on graduate employability and competence development, intending to present an international perspective on this matter. So when I read all these three questions, I think this one, the third one, is fairly detailed and fairly narrow. But all these questions are very precise and clear. Okay, so now up at the top, when you see this number on these relevant slides, this is the number of the checklist in the PRISMA checklist. Okay, so I will follow those numbers, and this is in the same order in which it is reported in the PRISMA guidelines. So first thing that PRISMA recommends is to have a protocol. So what does a protocol do? It pre-specifies the objectives and the methods that will be used in the SLR. So it is something that you can follow, and when you publish your paper, this is something that others can refer to if they want to follow your style of research or if they want to replicate your studies. Indicative review protocol exists, and where to find it. So you can come up with a review protocol and put that on a website that is accessible to everyone. Once you design a protocol, it is possible that there may be some amendments, because when you begin research, you cannot explore all possibilities. So there may be situations where you have to go back and amend the protocol. So that is possible, but you have to give proper justification. You can't just go and amend the protocol without reporting that amendment. Next, registration. Registration of a systematic review with a protocol and a registration number is not yet common in all other disciplines, but in medical discipline it is done. And basically the reason for doing this is, if you are going to work on a review on a specific topic, it is better that you tell everyone that you are working on it, so that either others can join you in your study, or others don't do it because there is no point replicating the same thing. They can do something else. So such a registry, I think, is very helpful, but it is not very common. But it doesn't mean that you cannot uh, mention that. So I think one of you guys asked me on the community on where do we do the registration. So that is the answer to your question, that the registration can be done if there is a acceptable body within your discipline that records these registrations for SLR. You can register it there. If not, the least you could do is put it on your website. All right. The next step is eligibility criteria. So this is very important because you have to clarify what are you going to include in your study and what are you going to exclude in your study and why. So basically there are two categories here. One is the study category and one is the report category. So what does those two categories mean? So study characteristics means what part of research you are going to cover and what part of research you are not going to cover. So that is study characteristics. Okay. So that goes back to your research question. The next bit is the report characteristics. So what this refers to is when you are going to do your SLR, what are you going to include and what are you going to exclude from a publication point of view. For example, you are going to only select papers that are indexed in Web of Science or Scopus, or you are going to include Google Scholar or other databases. So that is not about research, but where you are going to get the research from. Similarly, language. You could say, I'm going to, our research team is going to select papers from any language, or we are only going to restrict it to English. If you are going to select the next type of report characteristics is which year you are going to narrow down to. So in the last 10 years, last 20 years, that all that has to be specified. So basically, give this information should be present in your systematic review because reviewers would be looking for this information and you should provide that in your paper. You have to unambiguously specify your criteria. So you cannot say I may select papers from 2010 or 2020. You have to be very clear. We have only going to select papers from these years. Proper eligibility criteria informs various steps of your research methodology going forward. So we will see that how these selections then get related to the rest of the research. It also helps you to build a proper search strategy. So one question that came up yesterday or day before on the community was, what is the and the or and the not in the search keywords that many of you have seen. So I'll cover that today. Ensure that studies are selected in a systematic and unbiased manner. So if you do not have an eligibility criteria, that is actually introducing bias in your study. And one of the things that reviewers would look for is evidence that you have provided them in your report or in your paper of how you have managed bias. So having this eligibility criteria, the protocol, these are all things that help you de-bias your studies. What is included and what is excluded and why? So keep this question in mind. That's why I made it very big here. This is what we should convey from our study. Next is information sources. So here we want to tell our reviewers or make it clear to ourselves as to where we are going to get our research papers from. So databases with the date of coverage. You also have to mention when did you search the database, the last date that the search was done. And these are some of the things that make a really good review paper, because these small things show the amount of effort that you have taken, and also amount of eff- the how to say, the quality of your paper, because you have thought about all these different items. It's not just randomly selecting some things and reporting them. The date of when the report was done or search was done also helps with the knowing the currency of the review. How recent is or how current is this review? Also report who developed and conducted the search. In today's case study, we will see some examples where they clearly mention authors, first author, second author, and third author did this, did the search, somebody else created the search strategy, somebody downloaded the papers. The whole process has to be as transparent as possible. Further, if you're going to use any additional materials other than the research papers, for example, what may happen is, and I think I have seen some discussion on community about this, is we are trying to look for some information in a paper, but that paper does not mention that information. So what happens is, many a times researchers do not report all the items, not because they don't want to, but because they don't know that they have to report it. And this is where PRISMA or methodologies like PRISMA can help, because it picks up this all information should be there in your SLR, in your systematic review paper. So if some very critical information is missing from the paper that you are reviewing, you can't just ignore that. You would have to contact the relevant author and ask for that information. And if you have done that, you have to mention that in your review as well. Further, other than search, if you are looking manually through the reference list, and which is a very common practice, that you get some search results, papers from the search results, and to make sure that this is comprehensive, and if you're not that you're not missing something, you can even look at the reference list for all these papers to ensure that you have basically covered all possible research on that particular research question that you have identified. So that is information sources. Let's move on to 8. So next step is, now that we have decided where we are going to search, we actually need to do the search. So editors of top journals or Q1 or Q2 journals, they recommend that you present or include a complete search string, or what the keywords that you use and in what format, what combinations, to include all that in your in the paper, and report that for at least one database that you have used. So that is what is required. However, many a times the journal has limited page numbers, limited pages that you can have. So including such information can be difficult, in which case you can have that as an appendix or something that could be added to the internet. But that kind of information, if you can include, that is really helpful. So including a proper search, running a proper search can be complicated and can be iterative. So there are some examples that I will show later, where it shows the complexity of search keywords or searches that can be possible, or that people have done actually. So including that or explaining that is very important and very relevant. Such a thorough search strategy also helps the reviewers or the readers to assess the comprehensiveness and completeness of your search, so that it is also possible to replicate. One more thing that you can also include to make your research even more stronger is to report if search strategies were peer reviewed. So you are not just relying on your own assumption, on your own judgment, that this is the right keyword and this is the right combination of keywords. You can actually come up with your keywords and the search strings and take it to some expert in your field, and ask them to review it before you actually begin the search process. Another thing to remember while doing a search, that searching is a very has many constraints. For example, you may have limited time, so you only select limited research. There could be constraints on financial resources. You may or may not have access to some resources, or you may or may not have enough people to work with you to do a very thorough or a very complex research. Sometimes you do not have access to the databases. Sometimes there is unavailability of experts with particular language. Remember, in previously I mentioned that one of the things that you also need to report is whether you are only limiting your papers that are in English, or you're looking for research that is published in language other than English. So if you're going to include other languages, do you have people or researchers in your team who have skills with those languages? So that is important so that is also a constraint. Database searching skills. Searching a database in itself is a skill, and you develop that skill and you as you mature as a researcher. So having a senior researcher on your team who can guide you through that searching process, or at least review your search strategy, is very helpful to ensure that your search is reliable. So I showed you an example of this kind of a table early on in the presentation. So this is just taken from this paper published in 2017, and they have shown the complete step-by-step process that they have done to run the systematic review. Next, we will move to study selection. What we need here is to state the process for selecting studies. For example, how we are going to screen different documents. What is the eligibility criteria for including in the systematic review? And remember, we talked about the protocols early on, research protocol. This is where some of this information is we would expect to have. So one thing that comes up is, and quite a few of you have already asked me this on numerous occasions, that how do we decide what papers we should select? So for example, I came up with a nice search strategy, search keywords. I ran the search and I got like 1,000 or 2,000 results. What do I do? How do I select which papers I should and which papers I should not? So this is a hard question to answer. And there is no standard process, I would say, for which studies to select in a systematic review. But what you would see when you read different systematic review papers in the literature, they would mention some factors that they have considered when running a systematic review. For example, they would say, we selected papers that were only indexed by Web of Science or Scopus. Or if that gives a large result, I mean, you search on Web of Science and still get 1,000 results, they said the next thing that could be applied would be papers that are published in Q1 journals. Even if that gives a large number of results, the next way to screen would be papers that have received over 500 citations or something like that. So you have to come up with some kind of a filter to help with the study selection. And again here, like I said, there is no standard process. So firstly, based upon your experience as a researcher, plus getting peer review, getting other researchers involved and helping in this process, all that can help in getting this thing. Additionally, I mentioned early on that you would need at least 2 or 3 people in a team when you are doing a systematic literature review. And the reason for that is that kind of, firstly, it brings in different opinions and different perspectives, and it also helps in strengthening your research, because you are not just relying on your analysis of the literature, but you get other researchers and you discuss with them whether the selections that you have made are acceptable or not. So imagine you have 100 papers, right? So you would have to decide or categorize these papers into some categories, and you put maybe 20 papers in category A, 30 papers in category B, and so on. But that is just your assessment, right? So what you can then do is ask your co-authors, can you have a look at this 100 papers, and these are the 5 categories that I have come up with. Maybe don't give them the categories, don't tell them which papers you have categorized in which category. Okay, just tell them that these are the 10 or 5 or 10 categories that I have come up with. These are the 100 papers. Can you categorize them? And then once they have done it, then compare it with what you have done. Those that are in the same category, it just shows that there is agreement. And those papers that are in a different category, then you would have to decide what to do. Either you keep those papers in both the categories, or you agree upon that this paper should only belong to one category. And that discussion, that agreement will happen offline, and you agree upon a consensus, and then you decide that, okay, this paper would be grouped in this category. And this information, all this information has to be reported in the study selection section. You can also, excuse me, you can also mention intercoder reliability. There are some tests that you can do to show what is an acceptable level of intercoder reliability test. If you refer to one of my papers that I gave as an example in the last session, which was on online customer engagement, you can see I have done the intercoder reliability test in that paper. Okay, let's move on to point 10, which is on data collection. Now here you have to tell the reviewers, tell the readers, how did you extract the data from papers? So you have to describe the method of data extraction, any processes that you followed, and for getting that data, and also confirming it from different investigators. Reviewers extract information from each included study so that they can critique, present, and summarize evidence in a systematic manner. So imagine an example. I think we did this last session, where I told you to identify a literature review paper, so which you have done here. And from that paper, I asked you to extract a few pieces of information. One was, when was that paper published? Second, how many years? The papers that were reported in that literature review came from how many years? So from 2010 to 2020, something like that. So that is an data extraction process. Similarly, I asked you to find out how many total papers did they review in that. So these are examples of data extraction or data collection. So we are trying to find out information and extracting that information from the paper. So what information needs to be extracted will depend upon your research question. Okay. So when we did last week, which was about literature review, our objective was to find out what other papers exist. So for that, our question was, what other systematic reviews are there in the literature, and which years they covered, and how many papers they studied, what were their findings. So this was the information that we were looking for. When we come to the next stage, where we are going to review the actual literature for the research question that we have identified for our lit review, we have to decide what information we are going to collect, and then that information that we are going to collect has to be shared with all the research team, And depending upon your research protocol, you would decide who is going to collect all that information, and who is going to summarize, and so on. So that is a data collection process. The author should describe these methods, including any steps taken to reduce bias and mistakes during data collection and data extraction. Reviewers ideally should also state whether they confirm the accuracy of the information included in their review with the original researchers. For example, by sending them a copy of the draft review. So this is also very interesting step, that you have done the review, written the research paper. You could then send a copy of that paper to all the authors whose studies you have included, to ensure that what you have reported is correct and it is what they also agree upon. So sometimes your assessment or your perception of what research was and what you have reported may or may not be similar, or may not, there may be some variation. So better to confirm that. And if you do so, again, you can report that in your systematic review paper. Describe any steps used to avoid double counting and piece together data from multiple reports of the same study. So this is important when you are actually reviewing empirical studies, and which is most of this reviews. I think we will be focusing on that. What happens is, when a study is undertaken, if it is a long-term study, there could be different parts, subparts within the study, and those parts may be published at a regular interval. So you finish part 1, you publish a paper. Part 2, you publish a paper, and so on. So if your research question requires the information from all the parts of a particular study, you have to ensure that you get all these papers first, and ensure that those are the right papers, because sometimes there may be working papers but not the final reported or published papers. So double counting can happen there. And once you have these multiple reports, what steps you took to make sure that you have collected all the information that was required. So all this, basically what we are trying to do here is provide evidence every now and then, as to, yes, we have done this step, this is why we did it, this step ensures that we have done it correctly, and we are avoiding managing bias in our study. So this is basically this process of proving that what you have done is good research. Okay, so next let's talk about data items. So here in data items, we want to list and define all the variables for which data was sought, and any assumptions and simplifications that were made. Again, coming back to the previous examples, data items could be examples such as what information we are extracting from each paper and putting it together. So that is example of data items. It is important for readers to know what information review authors sought, even if some of this information was not available. So again, I mentioned you can contact the authors of the papers if they have not mentioned specific data items that you're looking for in your review. If the review is limited to reporting only those variables that were obtained rather than those that were deemed to be important but could not be obtained, bias may be introduced and readers might be misled. So again, do your best possible effort to collect all the information that is required to make the decision or to answer your research question. So if you are going to answer a question and from one of the study you cannot find that information that you need to answer the question, I think, and if you still report that study, it would be considered introducing bias in your research. And the last step, I think, is a risk of bias in individual studies. So, overall, the reason why we are doing a systematic review of literature is to ensure that we have taken a very transparent approach, a very methodical approach to select papers, search papers, uh, capture all the required relevant information, ensure that there's nothing missed out, there's nothing, no important information is missed, which is important from a research from the point of answering the question that we have stated for our study. So all those basically what we're trying to do from the very beginning when we start in the Prisma. As we progress, we are gradually taking steps to reduce bias, increase the transparency of our research, improve the quality of the research, show the thoroughness and completeness of the activities that we have taken. Okay, so that is steps for reducing bias. If there was no explicit steps taken to reduce the risk of assessment, reduce bias, you need to explain why that was the case. So but that is where we see it very rarely. But if there is such a situation, you should mention that. Okay, so question 13 to 6, sorry, points 13 to 16, like I said, are advanced topics. So I'm not going to cover them. And also they relate to meta-analyses. So if you are interested, the paper is here. The title of the paper is here. You can download it and read it. And I would recommend you read this paper because it is a very good paper. And more than what I cover, I mean, I could not cover the entirety of the whole paper in this session, but I've picked up the relevant points under each headings. But I would strongly recommend you look at this paper in your time. Okay, so now I've finished the first part, first session. Sorry, what happened here? Okay, so I'll open up for questions now. If you have any questions, you can ask me, and I can also check the questions that are on the. So this question is from Dr. Venkat Chitti. Could you please share the citation of PRISMA methodology that you have mentioned? So I have mentioned that, and it is also on the YouTube on the YouTube video. You can check it later, and it is there on the slides as well. The next question is with Siva. Again, the same thing. So yeah, I will share that. We'll share the link. Okay, BB, your question is Prisma can be used in social sciences? So yeah, I think Prisma is a systematic literature review methodology. So it can be used in any discipline. It is very common in the medical discipline, and it is being used, or it has been started to be used in other disciplines from the early 2000. So definitely is relevant for social sciences as well. Oh, John, if you're still there, thank you very much for attending. I see it is very early morning where you are. Okay. All right. So do you have any more questions? If you have any questions, we still have few minutes. I can take some more questions on this topic. In the meanwhile, I'll also copy the link to the of the Prisma paper. So give me 1 second. Hey, Roderick, how are you? I haven't heard from you this week. Last week, I think I remembered reading your report. Manohar, your question is it required to mention that we have followed Prisma? So, yeah, I think it is always a good practice to mention that you have followed a specific methodology because that strengthens your research. And when reviewers are reviewing your paper, they can review it from that context. So, definitely mention that in your paper. And also, when you're giving the title for your paper, please do mention that this is a systematic literature review. So the word systematic literature review should be there in the title as well. No. Your question on SLRs should be experimental or quantitative type. How about qualitative type? So basically, any empirical research could be used when you are writing an SLR, systematic review, because what you are going to report in a systematic review is a response to or an answer to your question. Okay, and that question could be. That question may have been addressed by researchers using many different methodologies. So it could be addressed using a quantitative approach, could be addressed using a qualitative approach, or could be a case study, and so on. So there is no limitation on which methodology you should choose or you can choose to run to when you're doing a systematic review. Is the Prisma method a benchmark for SLR? Otherwise, SLR is not eligible. Yes. No. Sorry. I would say yes and no for this question. Some journals who publish an SLR or using a Prisma, they would want it to be compliant, and which is when you would have to submit the checklist as well of all the activities that you have done. But it is not a compulsion. It is just a methodology that you may or may not use. In some examples that I will cover in the next session, you will see that there are variations of Prisma, and the variations are more the reason these variations are introduced is PRISMA, like I said, originally was designed for medicinal or health research. A lot of things that happen in these disciplines do not happen in other disciplines, which is why some of these items may or may not be relevant. So you could say that we have followed a PRISMA or a variation of PRISMA when conducting our studies. Thanks, Venkat. You got the paper. That's good. I recommend you reading this. It's a very good paper. I think I've done this. Okay, no, that's good. You understood what I had. Kindly elaborate a little more about intercoder reliability. Okay, Hina, to answer your question, it is intercoder reliability in itself is a topic for probably an hour. I will give you a brief explanation or a simple explanation of what it is. So let's say you have 100 papers and you have 3 researchers in your team. All of you. Okay, so the first version is you as a first author tag all the papers based upon what the area of or the category for that research is. Okay, so that is the first iteration. You can then ask your co-authors to do the same activity. So they look at the papers and they know the categories that we want to use and they categorize those papers. And similarly, the third author. Well, let's just for simplicity just assume 2 authors are there. Now you compare paper 1. If both authors agree, that's good. You give a tick. You do paper 2. Both agree, tick. So if all the 100 papers are agreed by all the 100 people, you can say we have a complete intercoder reliability. So the word intercoder means coder is the person who is coding the paper. Yeah. So first author or second author, when they tag the papers in different categories, they are actually the coders who are doing the coding. And intercoder means between 2 coders or between many coders. What is the similarity of their coding result? So that is intercoder reliability. And there are different tests that you can do to come up with a quantitative number that says that as long as the intercoder reliability is over certain number, say 70%, 80%, it is acceptable. So you can search for intercoder reliability as a topic and you can study that further. Is there any other method apart from PRISMA? Yes, there are many other methodologies that you can use for doing systematic reviews. I just chose PRISMA for this study because it is kind of well known or used quite often. Okay, Amanpreet, the paper that I suggested is there in my YouTube. Hang on. Okay, I have copied the link to the paper that I mentioned for intercoder reliability, so you can check that paper. All right, so I think I have answered your questions. Now we will take a break for 5 minutes and we will then start with the case study case study sections. So I'll see you all in after 5 minutes. Okay, so let's get back. So we're starting the second session now, second part of today's session, and this is focused on case studies. So I've got 5 or 6 case studies to cover. Depending upon the time we have, we will see how many I can cover. So let's start. So the first case study is I have taken is this paper. So all the papers that I'm showing you today in this session are all open access papers. Okay, so it is all of you can easily download these papers and review it at a later point. And I have copied all these papers on the links are on the YouTube description channel video description. So if you check that video description, you will find the links to all the papers. For now, I can I'll just copy it for you from my slides if you need it, but let me just copy this. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is the first paper that we are starting now. If you want to download it, you can download it. Okay, so well, first I want to start with the research question. The aim of this paper is exploring and understanding how design can contribute towards a CE stands for circular economy transition through the adoption of DFX approaches. Okay, it's a 2020 paper and it's published in Computers and Industry. All the papers are from good journals, good quality papers. So this is a research question. In terms of the introduction, some of you asked me how to write an introduction. So one thing I would suggest is look at the existing papers or existing literature reviews that you are currently reading as part of your study to see how they have written their introduction, what kind of things they have covered in the introduction, and try to mimic those ideas and from all the papers that you have studied. For example, in the last session, our plan was to look into different systematic review papers, right? So once you should have downloaded those papers by now. So look at their introduction, see how they have structured their introduction. So let's see, for example, this paper. Yeah. Considering the high competition of current individual contexts, manufacturers are asked to deliver products characterized by an increasing complexity. Products are supposed to address new circular and digital features to be integrated and systematized with multiple traditional functionalities, often thanks to the introduction of new technologies. From one side, the sustainability and circular economy paradigms raised both customers and providers' awareness about natural resource scarcity. So what you can see from this part of the section is the problem is being described. What is the problem that is being addressed? From another side, the servitization paradigm supported the advent of more sustainable economy by changing the focus from a products to product related services, so and so on. Okay, then we come to the methods and tools supporting the systematic integration of product services under a circular perspective are still under development. So they are saying that some work is still happening. Some initial benefits in this direction have reached through concurrent engineering, specifically designed for X guidelines are interpreted and so on. So we're kind of now jumping from the problem bit to the approach or the solution that could be used. And then so on and so forth. And if you come down here, this paper, therefore, the aim of this work is to explore and understand how design can contribute towards a circular economy transition through the adoption of DFX approaches to deliver suitable products, services. Okay, so that is the objective. So you can see that the introduction also covers the objective. The paper is organized as follows, and then give a structure or the layout for your paper. So basically, there is every paper that you read will have their own style of writing an introduction. What I mentioned in the first session was I like to kind of extend the abstract to the introduction. So if I mention a one line in the abstract, I would elaborate that a bit more in the introduction. So by reading the abstract and the introduction, the core contribution of the paper is very clear to the reader and also to the reviewer. All right. Let's take this example in a little bit more detail now. And so this is the section of the paper that we are going to write today, or what you will be completing in this in this week. All right, so let's see. I have highlighted some sections of this some sentences of this section to show all the things that we have studied just now about PRISMA, how it is being adopted in a paper. Starting with the research question, which is here. The keywords: circular economy, end of line, as suggested by a systematic literature review on CE. So you can even look for keywords from existing review papers. Design for X, DFX, design guidelines. So these are the different keywords that are used by this paper. What databases they used? Scopus, Science Direct. How many results they got? 402, 339. What was the information searched? Where was the information searched? From the titles, abstracts, and keywords. What was the final set of papers? 31. So by having, say, nearly 700 articles, they brought it down to 31. And before that 31, there was a middle step where the final set of 125 documents were considered for analysis after removing redundancy. And after evaluating those, they came down to the final 31 documents. Relevancy. The section was based on the relevance of documents, taking into account only those contributions proposing DFX approaches and related design guidelines. So from these large number of papers, once the duplicate documents were removed and titles and abstracts were evaluated, the actual evaluation was then based upon whether the paper is actually answering this question or not. Okay, that was the objective. What was the selection process? Authors selected only those documents contributing to a real enhancement of DFX methods and practices under a CE lens. So they are showing how the process happened. Search strings. Table 1 reports the 4 strings used to carry out the searches. I'll show you in the next slide. Additional papers, expert recommendations. Further, 25 documents were considered through cross-referencing process and 4 through hand search. So that is what I had explained earlier today, that after giving the example of after searching through the databases, you may also need to search through reference lists of those papers plus any other ways. 15 more documents were recommended by experts. So we are also including that. How did they report about managing bias? The entire process of selection and examination of these documents was conducted by 2 authors, carrying it out autonomously to not fall in bias of analysis throughout the review. Finally, their results were compared and made consistent to each other, leading to the research presented in this article. So you can see, although they have not mentioned here that they have done an intercoder reliability test, but they have taken some steps and they have reported that. And the next, once you have done all this, when you are categorizing the existing literature that you have gathered, you have to come up with some categories. They have mentioned how the research is being categorized in this section. This was their table, and I recommend that you should also have a table like this in your paper, because it gives a very graphical view of all the aspects. So in this table, it is about the keyword search that is being run. So design guideline and circular economy. Design for X or DFX. So either of these two and circular economy. So for each of the search string, they have reported how many articles they got. And I don't remember now, but I think this column is about, from these 33, 5 papers were selected. I think that is what it is. But when you read this paper, you may be able to get the actual information. So here the search was done for Scopus and Science Direct, and then the respective articles are shown here. The whole process of breaking it down and coming down to 31 is mentioned here. Venkat, your question about is there a limit on keywords? Then the answer is no. There is no limit on keywords. It depends upon the research that you are doing. All right. So somebody else earlier asked me about, is there any other method other than, I think it was other than SLR. I think it was Amanpreet. I think. So if you see this paper here, it says the research strategy is adapted from this paper, Smart et al. So although it is similar to PRISMA, and the table that the figure that they have shown is similar to what PRISMA recommends, there are many variations of these articles, of these methodologies that you can apply. And after that, when you look at the papers, when you are studying the existing review papers, my suggestion for you is to look for what all kind of information they report. And if you think that, oh, this is something I like and I would want to have it in my paper, you could have it. For example, here they are showing publishing countries where the authors are from, type of contribution, journal articles, conference proceedings, and where these papers are published. So some kind of a quantitative information you can also present. This section shows the categories on how they're going to organize their literature. Okay, so these are I think this paper has 6 categories. And they have decided to create a table that shows the research type. So whether the research was theoretical, case studies, or action research, what method, framework, guidelines, lit review. So basically some kind of a data item as per the PRISMA. Yeah, so these are the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry, 5 categories are there in this paper. And they have mentioned these papers 15, 8, 3, all the papers that are related to these topics. Another way to represent the same information, 5 categories or 5 themes of the research, example citations for each paper, how many number of papers are there in each section. Okay, so that was the end of the first case study. It took me 16 minutes to kind of complete this. So I have a feeling that I may not be able to cover all the 6 case studies, but let me see if I can speed up a little bit. Let's move on to the next case study. This paper is plastic recycling in additive manufacturing, a systematic review. Again, a very top journal, Journal of Cleaner Production. If you are in that field, you will know that this is one of the best journals. Is it acceptable or not? More sources included in literature review. Chakra, I don't understand your question. What do you mean? If you can elaborate a little bit more, I can answer it. In this paper, if you want to look at the introduction, I would suggest have a look. The introduction is quite big, so I have not covered it in this section, but you can see in the actual paper. Again, it's an open access paper. So one thing that I liked about in this paper is how they have kind of created this table which shows all the relevant information about the systematic review process. So let's see what they have done. Starting off with keywords: 3D printing, additive manufacturing, recycling, plastic, polymer, thermoplastic. So these are the 3 categories of keywords that they have used. And the reason I say categories is because when they are going to run their when they run their keyword search, they are using these combinations. Okay, so I wanted to show you this. So let me just. So this was a question about using keywords, and this is a good example. So I will take this example to explain that. So the most common things that you would see in a keyword search string is the use of the terms and or. And how do they work? So in this example, it is 3D printing. This word is also referred to as additive manufacturing. So when I'm going to write a search query, I could say tell it to the database, Google Scholar or Web of Science, that look for papers that have 3D printing or additive manufacturing. So I want papers that either use 3D printing or additive manufacturing in their title or in the abstract or whatever you specify when you're searching. Other than that, I also want to search for papers that have the word recycling or recycle. But instead of having these two, what I can do is put an asterisk next to L. So what that will do in the search is it will search for recycling. So anything after L, ing. At the same time, it will search for recycle. So variations of the words can be used using the asterisk key. So I want to search 3D printing or additive manufacturing, and I want to search papers that have recycling in it. Okay. At the same time, I want to search some more papers. Oh, sorry. At the same time, I want to search papers that have few other keywords. Okay, like plastic or polymer or thermoplastic. Okay, so this is a search string. We have used or when we want one of these to be included. We have used and when we want this to be included. So what is an example of one of the search results that would come, or search strings? So 3D printing and recycling and plastic. So any paper that has these three terms could be in our result. Similarly, any paper that has additive manufacturing, and you can put double quotes as well, so that it exactly search for these terms. Otherwise, you will get results that have additive in the title, manufacturing in the title, but it is not about additive manufacturing together. So yeah, I forgot to put that double quotes. You can put double quotes for the terms. So recycle is compulsory because we want all the papers to have recycle. But the third one, instead of plastic, now I want polymer. So that is another option. So this way, when you write a keyword strategy, a search equation or search strategy, it covers all possible combinations for the search. Next is the time period from 2009 to June 2019. They have covered Scopus, Springer, and Web of Science were the databases. What was their criteria? So you can see criteria here. Articles related to the use of recycled thermoplastic for AM technology. Studies should be focused on engineering, material, or process design. So this is kind of a criteria. So any paper that does not fit this criteria will be excluded from the results that we get. Procedure. Title, abstract, and keywords are screened to meet these two criteria. Introductions and conclusions were read. Full article was reviewed. Selection is made on the quality assessment. So what was the information searched for? These four things were searched. And why these four things were searched? To ensure that these point 1 and 2 here are met. So the papers, when you look for these four items in the papers, we want to ensure that they do these two things. Rest all is you can read it later, but this whole process is also shown graphically in this. identification, screening, eligibility, and inclusion. And this is important to, it is not, I mean, I won't say important, but it looks good to have this in your paper because it gives a very easy to follow, easy to follow approach, kind of. Okay. Uh, so if you see here again, systematic review methodology adapted from PRISMA principles. So this paper does not cover all the items mentioned in the PRISMA, but it adapts and uses some of those that are relevant. Again, we will go on to this part in more detail next in the next session. But for the, I wanted to show you is, because this thing may be there in your mind when you are doing the research, is how do I categorize the literature that I get? So by, in this place, when I run this search query, I get 92 papers. How can I group them in different categories? So here they have, I don't know whether they have built this framework or this is a framework that exists in the discipline. So here it says closed loop recycling framework for distributed recycling via additive manufacturing. So this may be a framework that already exists, and they have used this framework as a benchmark or as a guide to categorize the literature. So they would then group the literature in these 6 areas: recovery, preparation, compounding, feedstock, printing, and quality. So from those 92 papers that were reviewed, they would be grouped in these 6 categories. And I want to show you this one section, which is compounding. For example, recycling phase 3, which is compounding here. So they have written a section about this phase, compounding phase, by giving examples, or sorry, not giving, by incorporating the research papers that they have identified. And you can find out some conclusions or ideas that have come through here. Again, literature categories, again, a different table to show the literature from different perspectives. Again, what these perspectives would be would depend upon your research and your area. But when you read papers in your discipline, you will get some ideas. Okay, so this now brings us to the first activity. What I would want you to do here is think about your research question. What is your research question going to be? You may already have it or you may not have it, but you can start thinking about it now. And you can go and post your research question on this link. I will copy this link on the chat window. But start thinking about it. I'll give you 10 minutes to do this activity. Okay, I have copied the link of the case study 2 in the chat window, as well as the link for the community website for you to post your research to your response to this activity. Okay, so let's see what all you have replied for the research question topic. So, Diane, your research question is, what are the clinical skills graduate registered nurses require to perform a competent clinician, to perform as a competent clinician in the aged care setting? So that's a very focused question, explicit and clear. Um, uh, Hilda, your question is, what are the various aspects of income smoothing practices in the banking industry after the year 2000? By namely recognizing their definitions, the main objectives surveyed, and the research methodologies. So I would say the first bit is can be the research question. What are the various aspects of income smoothing practices in the banking industry after 2000? And this is how you're going to do it. This the next bit. Mariam, your research question is there any relationship between the teacher's growth mindset and professional development? Very good question. What are the attributes of professional development that help to develop teachers' growth mindset? So I think for the second question, Mariam, I would suggest you think a little bit more and try to make it a bit more narrower. Because I have a feeling that when you look for this particular question, there may be a lot of things that may come. Rafi, your question is impact of different mulching conditions on soil pH in a dryland agro ecosystem. I think this is good. Whistle, your question, what are the factors that lead to teacher burnout in elementary schools? Okay, so you are focusing on elementary school, so that is narrowing down the scope. What are some strategies that were used to reduce the consequences of teacher burnout in elementary schools? Yeah, so this is good. I would suggest removing the word some. So, what are these strategies? Try to make it more clear rather than having the word some that introduce vagueness. And this, okay, so this is good. I'll see if there is any more of you who replied. Rashenda, is there any association between smartphone addiction and sleep disorders among school going adolescents? Is there any association? So I would not call it is there any association, because what could be the answer to this question? Yes, there was an association, you know. So try to reframe this first bit. This one is good. So it could be, what are the key reasons or what are the factors or something along those lines. So that would be something that you could look for when you are searching papers. No, your question is, what kind of pedagogical and English proficiency feedback do university supervisors provide to their to their teachers during teaching practicum and their impacts on their EFL teaching competencies? So it's a good question. No, I think I would suggest you break this down into two questions. So the first part is here, and the second part is from the impact. Okay, so thank you very much, all of you. It's very good responses to the first question. We are nearly finishing 2 hours. I will so seems like I will not be able to do all the 6 case studies. So let me quickly go through a few more so that you get some more idea. The next paper is graduate employability and competence. I just now remembered somebody was doing the research question was about employability. I think it was Diane, your research, right? So this may be something interesting for you to look at. Excuse me. This paper aims to develop a systematic review on graduate employability and competence development, intending to present an international perspective on the matter. This is the research question. This is the paper, again, an open access paper. So you can see this logo here. Introduction, we can skip. The aim of the study is 1, 2, and 3. Research questions. What are the main research issues related to competence development? Are competencies being associated with graduate employability? Is there international concern about this topic? And so on. So you can get some ideas of the research questions when you read existing systematic reviews as well. Again, a breakdown based on PRISMA. Here they have mentioned that they used PRISMA guidelines. This is their search strategy, Web of Science and Scopus, 2009 to 2019. Inclusion and exclusion, peer-reviewed studies with articles in English and Spanish. So see here, there is a difference. It's not just English, but it's English and Spanish. The keywords that they have searched, keyword combinations, competencies and skill with an asterisk, and higher education asterisk, and employability and graduates. This was searched from the in Web of Science on titles, abstracts, and keywords, and also on Scopus. Managing bias. Titles and abstracts were reviewed independently by two researchers. MA and SF is the name initials of these two researchers, who used the above mentioned criteria, that is here, to determine paper eligibility to be included in the study. The full text was reviewed for final inclusion. All discrepancies were resolved by consensus with one of the researchers. Appendix A presents all the papers from this review. So you can see the papers from this review are attached as an appendix, which is something that you would see very common in good journals. Data extraction and article quality assessment were performed by three researchers independently. So similarly to what I had said before, they do independent evaluation and then compare. So that is again managing bias. These authors collected data from primary studies, that is data items. Screening the papers, screening of the title and abstract was done. We eliminated studies. Yes, I will share the links in the break time for you to look at all these papers. In the third round, a single reviewer read. So there are multiple rounds which they have explained here. The search resulted in 99 articles, and after including the criteria, 69 were selected. This is their figure, the process that is shown as per the PRISMA guidelines: inclusion, eligibility, screening, and identification. So those are the steps. When it comes to categorizing the literature, they have done it across these concepts, themes, dimensions, actually skills. So that is how they have categorized the literature. This shows how many papers are there in each of this category. And I think this is the number that they have assigned to a particular paper, which is in the appendix. They have categorized it based on the field of knowledge as well. So another idea that you could incorporate in your paper. Okay, so that was case study 3. Let's move on to the next paper. This is a very good paper published in International Business Review. Research question here is, is not is mentioned across a few sentences. So I have copied all that here. Again, an open access paper. Managerial cognition has a fundamental role in the internationalization of firms. However, there exists no coherent understanding of how prior research has examined and captured the cognitive foundations of internationalization. So, kind of the question is somewhere around here. This paper provides a systematic review of this body of literature. I want to go through the introduction here, but I suggest you read it. In this in this paper, the research question is quite broad. You can see this paper provides a systematic review of this body of literature. So the body of literature is mentioned here, but it is a very broader research topic. Again, I have broken it down as per the PRISMA guidelines. Which databases were used? Web of Science, which year? We limited the search to business and management categories and to 14 leading IB and management journals. So these are the names of the journals that they have limited. So this is the reason why they've done this, is to ensure that they know the best quality research would be published in these highly ranked journals, and only they have limited, and which is why they have limited their search to those journals. This results in 189 peer-reviewed articles. 136 were suitable. So papers, selected papers, exclusion criteria is here, and their criteria was all conceptual papers from our sample were excluded. So they only focused on empirical research. Other than that, they manually checked the list of references of the articles published in 2017 and 18 to further ensure that there was nothing that was missed out. The purpose is presented nicely here, is to present a systematic review of cognitively oriented empirical internationalization research. Literature categories in three main areas. This is the research gap that they have mentioned. This is the how the literature is grouped. How the paper is structured, and the paper layout. In this paper, they have used the concept of thematic codes to categorize or group the literature. These are the themes or the thematic codes that they have used to study the literature. In terms of management of bias, they have one line here that says the results of the content analysis were cross-checked by the authors. So I think somebody today asked about how many keywords can be there in your search. So to answer your question, have a look at this slide and look at the number of keywords that are included. And all these keywords have or. So attention, or mindset, or casual gaps, or this. And they want to and that with internationalization or international expansion. And you can see international expansion is in double quotes. It's two words. They want to look for papers that exactly have these two words together. So how do they come up with these many words? So firstly, you could look at existing literature. You could look at the keywords that are used in research papers based on your own understanding, your knowledge in that research area, using the synonyms that mean the same thing, and so on. So that's how you can come up with a broad range of keywords for your search. And you should mention this search in your paper as well. It's a very good practice to have that. Again, a normal layout for the process. Categorizing of the literature, method, analytical level, area of contribution, which cognitive research area this paper is. So some form of a table to evaluate or to categorize the literature or group the literature in some categories. Okay, so that finishes the second four case studies. Now I would like you to think about your keywords and come up with your search string and post it on the community. I will copy the link to the community in 1 minute. So you can start thinking about the keywords that you're going to use and how you're going to use or and. All those who have sent me a request to join the community, I have just accepted it. So please check your email. If you do not see the email, check your spam folder, and or if you're using Gmail, check the promotions folder. The email may go there. And one more thing that you can do is to add that email address to your list of contacts so that you do not miss any of the emails that are sent out. Okay, let's see who all have replied to this question. So Hilda, your question, your search string is income smoothing and bank. So if I remember, in your research question, you had in fact mentioned banking, I think. So you might want to say bank with asterisk to it. Biju, bamboo, and income or employment, uh, and rural livelihood. So here, Biju, I would suggest you put this into brackets. So what is or? So is it income or employment is the or bit? So put a bracket here. Or is it bamboo and income or employment and livelihood? So putting a bracket will clarify the search. I think it applies to a lot of you who have not used brackets. Teacher, asterisk, growth mindset, and professional development. Okay. Anushka, procalcitonin or biomarker and infection and children or pediatric population. Okay, this is good. As a practice, a good practice, when you do the keywords, when you write or and, put it in capital letters. Diane, clinical skills or should be a capital, technical skills and graduate nurses. So if this or this, then put a bracket here. And registered nurse or novice and aged care and residential facilities or nursing homes. The nursing home, I think you can even have a home and an asterisk here. Residential facility and an asterisk here because there could be facility, facilities. Asterisk here as well would work. Where and tribology and COF. Okay, so I think even it would be good to expand this COF or the full form of COF. Risk management, there has to be something here. Diva. Risk management, either or and, then, or is the bracket wrongly placed? I don't know. Risk assessment or risk mitigation or risk monitoring and supply chain and artificial intelligence. Rest all looks okay. Nunung EFL University supervisor feedback. I think that may be quite a big keyword. You can see how you get results, what kind of results you get on that. EFL, I think you might want to have a full form of EFL as well. So EFL or the actual full form of EFL. Pedagogy, pedagogy with a star here. So pedagogy, pedagogical, those things can come up. English proficiency, or after N you can put a star. Proficient, proficiency, those kind of options can be taken up. Okay, so that's all the results here. I will take a few questions now. I see there are quite a few questions that have come up, and then we can move on to the next session, next bit. So Inarni mentioned the question. I have a question. I believe research object objectives and research questions are very much related. If we already specify the objectives, can we simply leave out the research questions in the paper? I would suggest, I mean, those two are two different things. Firstly, they're not one thing. So, research objective could be a broad vision for your research. What is it that you want to achieve? And research questions will kind of guide you to that vision. So, breaking that down. And I think one of the examples that I did today, we had research objective and research questions. Let me see which one was that. So, see, for example, this in this paper, they have the aim or objective of the study, and then they have broken it down into research questions. So, I would suggest uh, if you have, keep both. Okay. The next question is with Sivatanyasi. Would there be any problem in publishing research paper if a researcher handle the SLR alone without co-authors? Yeah, so there will be problems here, which is why in the first session I mentioned that you should uh, form teams or groups. Many of you already have met each other on the community. So I think best way would be if you can search for some people either in the community or in your college or university, wherever. You would require more than at least two or more than two people to be uh, to make a good SLR paper. Otherwise, journals will say it is the editors may say it is a biased study. Okay, I think that is all the questions. Neelam Shah say I have sent 1 week back, no approval. So all those, like I said earlier, the emails, approval emails are automatically sent in a short period of time. But most of the time, those who haven't received it is because that email would have gone to your spam folder or to like the promotions folder on Gmail. So please check that, everyone, so that you don't miss out on what's happening in the community. So I have accepted all those who have sent me the request. So the email should have gone to you. Just search your email mailbox. Okay, so I think I have taken up all the questions. Exploring the, I think Kalyani has mentioned it here, her research question, I think, exploring the dynamics of positive psychological capital. Okay, that's good. Kalyani, if you're not on the community, maybe join it today. Would be good to see all others, what others are doing. Okay, let's move on. We're already. So paper 5 as a case study, this was on blockchain technology and supply chain management. It has two research questions: identify the most relevant organizational theories and examine the content of each identified organizational theory. Um, I'll skip the introduction, but something that are interesting here is the way they have shown the steps, the inclusion criteria that they have mentioned here, plus the rationale. I think this is a good way to kind of show, uh, justify your reasons, or give reasons for your inclusion criteria. Um, as per the research objective, they wanted to look at organizational theories. If you see here, identify the most relevant organizational theories, and here they have categorized the literature based upon those organizational theories. So if you, again, if you, when you are, we will talk a bit more about it in the next session, where you want to, where we will discuss how you can best categorize your literature. So some ideas are like these ones. And then each of the theory, so 3.1 is agency, information, institutional. So the write-up of, based on the literature or the findings from, say, these different papers are then summarized, criticized, evaluated, analyzed, and reported under these sections. So 3.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. One interesting thing that I liked about this paper, which is they have come up with some future research directions for this, for example, based upon each theory, like these questions, again some more questions here, future research directions and questions. So this is also a good topic, when you are, if a paper like this elaborates on future research in a very detailed manner, it is a good idea to get some ideas from such things. I will show you one of my paper, and if you look into that, oh sorry, not this one. Okay, so if you look at this paper, I'll copy this here as well. So this is the structure for my paper. Introduction and methodology was covered here. Detailed analysis of literature and future work. So kind of the future work section was, I would say, at least 30% of the paper. So anyone who is reading this paper will, reads this paper, they will get so many ideas for future research. So coming up with a thorough future work section of your paper is a very big contribution of your systematic review article. So something similar that these guys have done in this paper as well. Okay, and finally I will do this last paper. This is from the marketing field, and also a very good paper. I would suggest you, if you are in this discipline, read it. And even if you're not in this discipline, still will be a very useful paper to see or to study from the structure point of view. So this is the table for their inclusion and exclusion criteria. Typical chart. So here they have said using Denier's 8-step process of conducting a systematic review. So this is not using PRISMA, but if you see the steps here are kind of similar to some of the steps that are listed in the PRISMA checklist. So there are other researchers, other systematic review methods as well that you can use, and you will find that in each of your discipline areas there may be specific papers that have come up with something like this. They're a discipline version of the systematic review process. This is how they have categorized the literature. Breakdown based upon different topics, how many papers, what was the type of the methodology in that empirical study, qualitative, quantitative, mixed. So I think somebody asked today whether we can have different studies in a qualitative, quantitative. So here you can see qualitative is included in this systematic review. Similarly, quantitative and mixed methods. Some more kind of a grouping or characterization of papers based upon different categories. The same thing continues. Okay, so that was a quick completing the last two case studies that I had for you today. Now I had one more task for you, which was to think about what categories you would have for your literature, or how you're going to group your literature review. Just put some ideas at this stage, because we will work on it more in the next session, that is next Sunday. So I'll copy this now for you to write some ideas. There is a link on the community where you can post your responses. Okay, have you got any? I can only see one response here so far to this question. If you are writing it, just give you a couple more minutes. Okay, Diane has mentioned skills and competence, performance of skills, perceptions of readiness or competence, essential nursing skills, and healthcare setting. So those probably are the 5 areas uh, that may under which Diane could write her literature review or systematic literature review. And you will notice that when you are doing this activity, you would go and change or refine these activities or these headings that you have come up with, and that's fine. Uh, because it is an evolving process. You cannot get the final set at the beginning unless if you are using an existing framework or a methodology. So I think there was someone in the chat asked about this question. This one here. Uh, Janatu, who mentioned in SLR, do I need to mention the theory? So if you are going to categorize your literature based upon a specific theory or a framework, then you have to mention that. And then those components or the categories that are mentioned in the framework would be how you would be analyzing your literature. So again, I think I would again refer you to this paper, which I earlier mentioned to you, where I have done the intercoder reliability, same paper. So that could be a good reference here as well, because although it's not a literature review paper, we have studied uh, the existing literature and came up with a framework. And that process of doing that qualitative study and deriving that framework could be the first step. And the next step would be taking that and doing a thorough lit review, systematic lit review using that framework. So yeah, so that is possible. Okay, looks like nobody else has replied, so I think we can move on. Yeah, that's it. Nobody else has mentioned anything. So that was the two main things for today's session that I wanted to cover. The next thing, yeah, we can open up for Q&A now. If there are any other questions than what have been than those that I have already answered on the chat window. So if you have any questions, we'll take a few minutes now to take on those questions, and we'll do a little bit of writing today. So if you have any questions, please post them now. So while you are, if you are posting any questions, so what I want you to do now is, there's one quick question. I'll take this one. Should we use same words in the title and keywords? Yeah, I think makes sense. Not it is not compulsory to use all the keywords in the title, but as long as the title covers some of the keywords and basically conveys the main objective uh, of your literature review theme. I think that is sufficient to be included in the title, not to make it too big. Next question: how many research questions should be there? So there is no fixed answer to this question. It could vary depending upon your discipline, but one thing you could do is you can look at your own discipline papers, systematic review papers from your discipline, and see what kind of questions they ask and how many questions they ask. So that itself will give you some good idea, which is why last week I spent a lot of time with you to study the existing literature review papers, because that is a very important activity to kind of assess your discipline. Yes, I will copy the links to these case studies as well. Okay, so now what I want you to do is open up your Word document and follow this screen that you can see here, and start to write your version of your methodology section, which is mentioning all these aspects. So what is your research question, what keywords you are going to use, which databases you're going to search, and if you don't have some information, for example, you don't know how many results you will get for a keyword, for now just put a dummy number. Or you just say X or Y documents were searched. But I want you to kind of start writing this information now, as your writing activity for today. Okay, so once you have done that, you can post it on the community, and I will open up and share it with you, discuss it with you. So let's keep say 10 minutes for this activity. So it is showing 11:38 to me on my clock. So till 11:48, 10 minutes spent on that. And for now, just follow the template or guide structure that this paper has. But later you can go and improve upon by looking at some other papers from your field. Okay, so for those who did not understand, I see some comments here. So basically, what I want you is to write up this part for your paper. Okay, based upon your research questions, based upon your results, based upon what was searched, what keywords were used, which databases were used, and so on. So follow that and write this bit in the next 10 minutes. 3 more minutes for you to finish the writing and post it on the link that I have just shared on the chat in the chat window. Okay, let me see if you have any of you have replied or responded to the. Diane, your question about redundancies. So redundancies refer to any duplicate results that may have come up, or reports, or sorry, paper reports that may have different versions. So that is what is referred to as redundancies in this section here. So when you search from 2 different or 3 different databases, there may be overlapping documents. So those are redundant documents. We just have to use one version, one document, one research paper from those results. So that is what we refer to as removing redundancies. Suveksha, I don't understand your question. So what we are basically doing now is we are writing uh, the methodology part of your systematic literature review paper. And in the methodology part, you have to mention all the activities that you have taken to that as per the PRISMA guidelines. So what keywords you selected, how you selected those keywords, why you selected those keywords, how many total keywords you had, what was the search query that you designed using those keywords, how many authors were involved in downloading the data, all that information, whatever I covered in the today's session, goes into one section of your literature review paper, which is the methodology section. So that is what we are writing now. Okay, looks like it is taking longer than 10 minutes for you to finish. So maybe if you cannot finish it now, you can work on it for this week. So the task for you for this week is to complete this section on literature, on methodology of your literature review, systematic literature review paper. And whatever you see on this screen, plus the next, this slide, plus the next slide, plus any tables, the flow chart, all those activities are what you need to complete for this week. So that by the end of, before we begin the next section, next session, you will have these activities completed, or that is your section 3 of your literature review paper will be ready. So some things you might need to fill up, and you might have to work with a few other researchers to comply with the SLR guidelines. Yes, Venkat, I think it is going to take some time. I thought 10-15 minutes would have been sufficient to come up with like a quick first version, but looks like a lot of you are taking time to come up with that. So I don't want to rush or push you to come up with that now. Definitely take your time. The video will be available on YouTube on my channel, so please check that out. Follow it step by step. Strongly recommend you to go through the whole session once again, and focus on the the PRISMA methodology, the different steps, what these different steps mean, and how you can apply that for your study. Watch it over and over again, because I think that will make it clear, and follow it step by step. Look at these 6 case studies that I have covered here, and also similarly look at some papers from your discipline. I could only cover so many case studies, could not cover more. And I know all of you are from all different disciplines. Yeah, so once that is done, I think you are kind of 50% with your paper writing and research for doing this. The rest bit is more on synthesizing your literature, and that we will be covering in the next week session. So if you have any more questions, we still have 6 more minutes before I would conclude this session. Thanks, Diane. Hope you enjoyed today's session, and similarly, all of you who came and attended the session. I would like to thank all of you, especially those who have come, who have attended the session at a time which is not very uh, convenient. It may be either too late in the night or very early in the morning, but your dedication to be present here in these sessions over the last 3 weeks just shows that you have decided to take on this challenge, take on this initiative for the betterment of yourself and to achieve your research uh, vision, research objectives, research plan, whatever that may be. I would again request you all to please give me some feedback on this session. Anything else I could improve upon, or if you would like me to cover something more in next session, I would do that. I know today's session has been pretty full on. A lot of things we had to cover. I felt that the time was just not enough, but 3 hours just passed very quickly. Thanks, Nono. That's good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dharmender. Uh, Neelam, if you could elaborate a little bit more on this, I can definitely try to help you. Thanks, Rafi. Thanks, Roderick. I think you probably can go to sleep now. I think it is fairly late for you. Thanks, Venti. Really happy to see your comment. Thanks, Dan. I think that was my intention, was to cover, like, break down the whole systematic literature review writing process into different sections, and give you the time, like a week worth of time to uh, digest whatever I have taught and apply it as you go. So I'm hoping by the end of week 5, you would have the first draft of your paper ready. Some of you have already sent me your write-ups, and I can see that the quality of your writing has improved. You have taken on my feedback and revised the documents, so I'm very happy to see these changes that are happening in your research writing. Thanks, Anushka. Thanks, Hina. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Swati. Thanks, Siba. So, thank you all very much. I really appreciate you attending this. And it's not just uh, helping me a lot in organizing how I teach this. So, if I run this session in the future again, I've also learned a lot in this exercise. So thanks, and all the feedback that you provide is very enlightening. Makes me happy when I read something very your comments in the feedback. So that's it for today. Thank you very much, and we'll again meet next Sunday. In the meanwhile, work on this research methodology section. Try to finish it off. It is fairly straightforward. Any answers or any numbers that you don't have at the moment, just leave it like a blank, and you can fill it up later on. But I hope with this progress that you're making, you will have a very good paper, and not just a good paper, but a very thoughtful and carefully crafted paper. Again, once also remember to read that Prisma paper that I gave you, and see what those elements that you can apply within your discipline, and also find out if there are any papers within your discipline which have a variation of Prisma. And if you think that is more relevant to you or the journals where you want to publish, then you might as well use those journals. use those SLR methodologies for your research. Okay, so on that note, I think I would like to thank you again, and hope you enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.